Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Shtark Tank, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a mentor in the workforce. Today, we are celebrating 50 episodes of Shtark Tank. Normally, I'm very punctual and on time, but for various reasons, this episode is coming out 4 weeks late. Our 50th episode was actually the first of the Rabbi Sachs series, and I wasn't about to miss his yahrzeit. But I still want to take a moment to reflect back on this journey, to tell the story of this rapidly growing podcast, and to share with the listeners a bit about my own story. Even though I am much more comfortable asking good questions and learning from those with much more wisdom and experience, today I am stepping out of my comfort zone and into the guest seat. Our host today is Rav Efrem Goldberg, the Rav of Boca Raton Synagogue and the host of the Behind the Bima podcast. My name is Yaakov Wolff, and this is a special edition of Shtark Tank.
Hello, everyone. My name is Efrem Goldberg. I have the privilege of serving as the Rabbi of Boca Raton Synagogue, and I'm very excited to join Yaakov Wolff today to celebrate the 50th episode and all that has been accomplished through Shtark Tank. So thank you for this opportunity, Yaakov, to participate, to be part of, and to learn more about behind Shtark Tank, what motivated you, inspired you, and got you going. So tell your listeners who've been enjoying your podcast a little bit more about you. You haven't had a chance to focus necessarily on your background. What should they know about you and where you come from?
Rabbi Goldberg, thank you for stepping in the host seat today. I appreciate it. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, a little bit before my bar mitzvah. My parents gave me by far the best gift ever, and they've given me a lot of really great gifts, is that they took me on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael with a loving family and a home in Beit Shemesh, and that was a tremendous bracha 17 years ago this past summer. So I did middle school and high school in Eretz Yisrael. I joined the Hesder program in Keren B'Yavneh, where I did the army. A little bit of a crazy story of what happened to me in the army, but that's maybe for another podcast. And then after my time in the army, I went back to the second part of the yeshiva program in Keren B'Yavneh, and I settled down. I got married. At that point, I really had only one interest in my life, and that was to learn Torah. And Baruch Hashem, it worked out well. We got an apartment in the Keren B'Yavneh campus. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. It really worked very, very well. I ended up staying for 7 years and 3 children later, and smicha came out of that. Not because I was really had any plans to go into chinuch. I don't think I had any great plans in any direction, but I was enjoying the learning. It worked, and it was great. It was lovely. But then at a certain point, I had to start thinking more about parnasa and what was going to be after. You know, the Keren B'Yavneh apartments are meant for avreichim who are doing the smicha, and I was nearing the end of that. So that was just I ended up having to start really thinking deeply about my career, which is sort of what led me to this next stage.
So Keren B'Yavneh, I too went to Keren B'Yavneh, not for 7 years and not for Hesder. Was there a time limit? And if you wanted to be there for 20 years, could you have learned there for 20 years?
No, officially the apartments are for avreichim, and most of the avreichim do the rabbanut smicha, which takes around 5 years. There is a dayanus program, but that's a little more exclusive and it takes longer. But really, the yeshiva is wants people to come and to do rabbanut and then to move on.
Interesting. Now, you went from there to being learning full-time and balancing that with the army, but after the army learning full-time to having this interest in the topic of B'nai Torah in the workforce. How does somebody who is still spiritually aspirational, wants to be a Ben Torah, but balance that with a workforce and a workplace that sometimes can feel like it's in conflict or compromise? How did you become interested specifically in that?
So actually, I think some of the credit comes to you, Rabbi Goldberg, because some of the articles that you put out, going back a good couple of years, really started raising these questions in my mind of how our Torah values interact with some of the challenges of modern society and what are some of the opportunities and the challenges on a broad level. More practically, I did realize that parnasa doesn't come, just from Shamayim. There's also an element of ishtadlus, and I knew that was going to have to cut, that was going to be a part of it. And even when I was in yeshiva, I knew it was not only my wife's responsibility to take care of the income. I was doing some side jobs. I ran the yeshiva's website and YouTube and emails and even the Twitter account for a while in Keren B'Yavneh to have some extra parnasa. So that was always something that was sort of on my mind. And then at a certain point, it was like, well, I have to make some real decisions in addition to just doing some side hustles, but we'll think a little bit deeper about where I'm headed in my next stage of life.
Interesting. So you chose to focus. What does one do when focusing on B'nai Torah in the workplace? Are there specific svarim? Is there a curriculum? Are there people or personalities as mentors? I'm flattered and thank you for your comment about some of the articles. I certainly wouldn't say I'm a specialist in that. So how do you undertake that ambitious goal of focusing on or becoming an expert in B'nai Torah in the workforce?
well, I wouldn't call myself an expert, and maybe we'll get back to that in a moment. But I think that you raised a very important point, which is that around the time that I was starting in Kollel, Rav Arnold Piansky came out with his landmark Sefer Ben Torah for Life, which is incredible, and everyone should read it and chazr it again and again and again. But as I was thinking deeply and having some of my own personal deliberations, I really felt there were a lack of resources. There wasn't that much out there. And I spoke to some Rebbeim, and my Rebbeim, I have utmost reverence and awe for them. But when it came to career guidance, I felt like something was missing, because in the end of the day, they're Rebbeim, and at the end of the day, their knowledge and their intimate connection with the Beis Medrash limits them in their ability to give career guidance. And I actually found that speaking to Balabatim who have more experience in actually living that lifestyle were a lot more valuable. So at a certain point, I had this eureka moment where I said, well, why don't I just take all these conversations, which I'm anyway having, because anyway I need to find this guidance and this hadracha, and then I can just record those conversations and share them with Chaverim, because when I asked them for their resources, they also said that they didn't have anything great to rely on and to draw upon. There's a funny story, actually. I was starting my last year at Kollel, and I thought to myself, maybe I should go and give some shiurim somewhere to get a little more chinuch experience. And my wife said, why are you going to start schlepping? Maybe you should start a podcast instead. You just do it from your living room. And then a few weeks later, she saw me working really hard at night, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I'm starting my podcast." And she said, "What?" But that was a few things came together, and it really worked out well.
Ezer Connector. So why did you? I mean, there definitely is brilliance to that. I appreciate it very much, because I have the privilege and the opportunity. I'm invited to speak in many places. I love sleeping in my own bed, living in my own community, davening in my own shul, and podcasts give you the ability to speak locally, live locally, and yet reach people far away. But why did you choose that medium? You could have written a book, articles, started a blog, used social media to promote awareness, but you specifically went to the podcast space. Why did you choose that? And maybe your listeners are interested in learning, how hard is that? Is that a big deal? What's involved in starting a podcast? People picture a huge investment of money. You need to be a technological genius. You need to invest in marketing. How did you decide that? And what's involved then in starting it up?
Okay, a lot there. So let's start with the first things first. So as far as the podcast format, it's very interesting, because I have had exposure to different forms of social media and online content, whether it's on my own personal usages that I've done in the past, whether it's my role in Karen B'Avnet or some other nonprofits, which I've helped out a little bit in their media operations. And I felt that in the end of the day, all of these platforms, they really took away a lot more than they gave personally. The doom scrolling and the addiction and all those things, that I really felt them on the one hand. And on the other hand, there's a certain, shallowness to short form content, which is what dominates a lot of these platforms, clickbait and stuff like that. And I felt that when I discovered podcasts, probably around the time that many did, around the time that COVID was breaking out and Behind the Bima was rocking and exploding. So I realized that this is a medium which has real depth. You can have very substantive conversations on the one hand. On the other hand, they were all so busy, we're all hustling. So I can, while I'm washing dishes, I can get some very, very interesting, inspirational, and deep content from different thinkers around the world in different areas. So I felt that was a really great balance of something which is on the one hand very fitting for our very hustle bustle lifestyle and short attention spans. On the other hand, it was not shallow, it wasn't cheap. It wasn't addictive. Maybe the fact that there are no screens involved is also helpful. I don't know. I'm curious. You have a podcast and also other social media platforms that you are involved in as well. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you. I think it has enormous benefit. I think the key is that you use it, you own it, it doesn't own you. So the people who get stuck or lost in the black hole of those things. I use social media to promote articles, shiurim, make a comment. I don't use it to engage in dialogue, which some people aren't happy with me about, because they'll comment on and I don't engage. But I don't want to, because I don't have the time to, and I don't want to get lost in it and passionate about it, or be in the echo chamber about it, or the opposite, engage in a debate with one person and in my own mind be projecting as if, oh, that's what everyone must feel, I better get involved in this conversation. So I think using it as a platform to reach people, ba'asher husham, is a gift that Hashem gave us, and I think it's foolish to not take advantage of it. So the more we can magnify and we can spread a message that we think is valuable to listen to, and then let the audience decide. It's the democratization. So people will determine whether there's something worth listening to there or not.
Amazing. And just to answer your second question about the process of the podcast. So you're right that there is a conception out there that I must have a big studio and I must do all these fancy things. So, podcasting today is very, very easy. And if anyone wants to start a podcast, people have reached out. It's really lo bashamayim here. It's a great, as you mentioned, it's a great platform to discuss ideas, to distribute Torah, to connect with different people around the world. So it's more or less a one-man show and a no-budget show for the most part. I do want to give a shout out to a few people who have really been helpful early on and throughout. My cousin Yoni Schwartz in Teaneck, my friend Yitzchak Schmidman in Yerushalayim, my sister-in-law Shira, who's a graphic designer and a very talented one. So they've all sort of pitched in and helped out. But Big Adol, it's really been a lot of hustle, a lot of time to make sure that the quality is good. Editing is not that hard these days with transcription tools, but still the little details, you want to get them right. So it has takes a lot of time and energy and hustle, but it doesn't need a big budget. It doesn't need tremendous tools. You don't need to travel, as you mentioned. I do most of the stuff from my living room, which we can get back to where my living room is in a second. But all those things are really very low barriers to entry, and people who have a passion about a certain topic, a certain niche. Podcasting is a great way to attack it.
And did someone mentor you? Are you self-taught? Did you watch YouTube videos to figure out how to do that? And how do you go from the idea of, okay, which software do I use? How do I publish it? How do I edit it? To how do I then make sure someone's listening to it? Because there are a lot of people who have podcasts because there's such a low barrier to entry. And even though they post it, turns out that there's not a big audience for it, or maybe there would be a big audience for it. They have no idea how to reach that audience. So you not only technologically put the podcast together, but it seems to be having an impact on people. How do you reach that audience? How did you put it out in the marketplace of ideas that people found it?
So I think first and foremost, the fact that it's a podcast around a very specific value proposition and a pain point that people experience makes the marketing stuff basically easy. It's not like, well, this is my show, listen to me talk about myself and how great I am. That's something you really have to sell hard if you want people to actually care, because why should they? But this is a topic that when I tell people about it, or when people tell their friends about it, it clicks with a lot of people. And the people in the target audience immediately know that this is for them, and this is something they find valuable. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, it is a slow process, and then there are some episodes which I really poured my heart and soul into and didn't get that many listens, and it was a little bit disappointing. But in general, it's a slow organic growth. I'd love to maybe speed up a little bit because I think that the content is valuable and could be reaching more ears and more AirPods out there. But I think just that shift of like, there's something valuable in this podcast in general. I try to provide specific value in each episode, and the rest is sort of just like trying to spread the word. A little WhatsApp group, LinkedIn platform, nothing fancy, nothing special, but it's really around the pain point that people are familiar with, and hopefully providing them some inspiration to deal with it.
What makes for the best episode? Having the best guest, or talking about the best topic, or offering the most specific advice, or how much you spread it? What when you're looking back on the pattern, 50 episodes, you're able to look back and you see which worked well and which didn't work as well, which started conversations and which did nobody notice. What were some of the things that you saw made a difference?
That's a tough one. People sometimes ask me for my favorite episode, and I say that's the same thing as asking me for who my favorite child is, because I really did enjoy each and every one of them, and learned a lot from each and every guest and each and every conversation. I do think that in the end of the day, there is a celebrity culture, and there are some, the big names definitely get a lot more traction. And I think that for me, it's special to be able to bring out voices that are not normally heard, quote unquote, regular balabatim who don't have big platforms. People don't know who they are. So in a sort of ironic way, I'm almost happy about those smaller episodes, because the people who are listening really care about the issue in hand, and they're not like going after the fancy name. Obviously, it just helps when people have so much on their plate. So a familiar voice or a familiar personality draws them a little more. But I think that actually the ones that perform least tell me a lot more about the podcast than the ones that perform better.
So the original intent with the podcast was to help you. You were having conversations to find mentors, mar be'etzah, mar b'tfuna. You wanted the greatest wisdom, and then you just took the conversations and turned it into a podcast. So let's go back to how the podcast is helping you, how these conversations are informing you. Where are you living? You finished KBY. What's next for you?
Okay, so for a very long time, Karen Biab and I had an amazing chevra who had such a great influence on me and really shaped me into who I was. So very early on, even dating my wife, I said it was very important to me that we find the right community and have the right chevra for ourselves and for our children. And the professional aspect, I figured, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll make it work. I wasn't as worried about that. I was more worried about the ruchnius and the atmosphere. By the way, within that context, I think simple standard of living is also something that was very, very important to us, and we really wanted to look for that. We looked very far and very wide, and a whole bunch of different communities in Eretz Yisrael. Through a way that I'm still not totally sure, we found this really wonderful yishuv called Bnei Netzarim. I'm sitting here now. I'm around 5 miles from Gaza, around 1 mile from Egypt. It's a bracha that my wife and I are both been here long enough, 17 years for me, 19 years for my wife, that we don't need an American community. In fact, growing up in Beit Shemesh, we both actually saw some of the more challenging aspects of people who live in Israel, but in a very American, strong culture that can be challenging, and we realized that. So, mainly credit to my wife. She said, like, listen, we really need to just go for this and not be afraid to jump into a more Israeli environment. We found a very serious issue where Torah is taken very seriously, where people have very strong values about Eretz Yisrael, about Am Yisrael, and the simple living is also very nice. The fact that it's very cheap here, people have very, very simple standards of what makes them happy, was very important to us. And we're really, so far, we moved here in the summer. We're very, very happy here so far.
It's a great community. I haven't been there often, but I've been there several times because Chalutza, Shlomit, the neighboring areas are very close. I just saw you today, actually, was here in Boca. And it's amazing. It's a real pioneering community. So it's not just a place to land, it's pioneering. Even 75 years into the state of Israel, still pioneering, which is an amazing thing. But if it has a downside, it's that it's pretty far away from where the action is. I mean, assuming the action is not Beersheba or Egypt or Gaza. So you found the place to live. How does that stem with work?
Yeah. So I had a plan which I thought I was going to try to execute on. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his plans. But my plan was that, there are all these remote options nowadays, and remote work is becoming more of a thing. So I figured, even though it's, a good 2 hours from the main centers of business in Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, I figured I could work remote for an American company or for an Israeli company and go 1 or 2 days a week up and make the bigger commute. And so that was sort of the plan. And I started networking and speaking to people. I had some skills from the media and marketing work that I'd done in Keren B'Yavneh. I had done college courses and ended up getting a degree from Open University while I was in Kollel. So I had done my Ishtadlus ahead of time on a certain level, and I was just networking. I was speaking to people, and I was hoping that something would turn up that would allow me to work remotely and be able to make it work down here in Bnei Netzamir.
And did that turn out? How'd that work out? Did Hashem open some doors?
Hashem has opened some doors, and Hashem spoils me way more than I deserve, far more than I deserve. In one of these networking conversations, I was speaking to a fellow named Eli Klein. He lives in Beit Shemesh. Our families actually go way back. And he started talking to me, and I was asking for advice. And he's like, wait a second, like, you're moving to Negev? Why don't you come work for me? So he is the director of development at a really special place called Adi Negev. It's right outside Ofakim. It's the closest point in civilization to where I live, which is wild. It's a tragic story that one of the members of the marketing team lost her mother on October 7th, because Ofakim is right near Adi Negev, and there was a massacre of 50 people there on October 7th. And I spoke to him in the spring. I think it was right after Pesach, and she had taken like the winter just to breathe and to relax. And after Pesach, she had just decided that she's not coming back. And I picked up the phone and I called Eli. So from here to there, I ended up getting this job on the marketing team. It's a really special place. There's a whole bunch of things going on there, but among them is a special needs school, special needs residences for highly disabled and multiple disabilities, and also a rehab hospital where we have dozens of IDF soldiers who were these commandos who, were able to accomplish amazing physical things. And now they're giving every ounce of grit that they have to walk across the room or to drink a cup of water, which is very inspiring, very special. And it's really just a great bracha to be a part of it.
Great. That's great. So now that you are actually not just hosting a podcast about balancing Torah and work and life, now you're living it and applying it. Have the conversations panned out the way you hoped? Have they been useful? Is the wisdom being applied?
Yeah. So certainly, I really was looking for a podcast I could listen to on my way to work, and now I have one, and I can go back to old episodes and listen to them for chizuk. There are so many ideas that I have found helpful. I think just to point out two of them that are really have really helped me so far. Number one is an idea which we learned from Rav David Lappin, who's a Rav in Ranana and also a very high-level business consultant. And he said, like, work is not about making money. Work is about providing value. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up the world in such an amazing way that when you provide value to other people and you get paid for it, so that's the most sustainable form of doing chesed that you can do. Because if you're doing chesed just lishma, so that's wonderful, but like, how much time can you spend and how much energy can you invest if it's not sustainable like that? So that switch that you're providing value to other people, to your organization, to the people that your organization serves, and the paycheck is just there to help it work, to help the system run well. That was a very, very important insight that really helped me a lot. With regards to learning, so an insight which I heard first from the very first guest, Zevi Reinitz, and since from other guests as well, is the importance of writing. I've been doing a lot of writing, and it really helps keep my motivation going for learning when I'm researching things, putting them together, working on some articles on different topics. So those are two of the big ideas that on the working side and on the learning side have really helped me a lot. And I think just a third point on that is beyond just the specific ethos, the specific ideas, the fact that there's a discourse, the fact that there is a community of people who are supporting each other and are there for each other and are all along this journey, not by myself, because like in my office, I'm the only real, Ben Torah there who I see day to day, but to know there are others around on this journey, and to know that there's a discourse around it is very, very helpful. And maybe the last part of that is, now that I'm the Shtark Tank guy, it would look really bad if I stopped being Shtark. So I really have to keep it up now.
There's a story that I forgot to mention, but I think it's important to share here. As I was thinking about my future in the job market, I was certainly worried about my Torah learning. Was I going to go from full-time Avrech to just learning bits and pieces here and there? I was also well aware that not all hours of the day are created equal, and learning very early in the morning or very late at night is just not the same as learning during the day. It was clear to me that my best hours are in the morning, and I wanted to allocate that time for Torah. On the other hand, most normal jobs are full-time with an expectation to work from 9 to 5 at the very least. Some people said, hey, you're Anglo, you can work for an American company with American hours. But that would mean being completely unavailable for my wife and kids during supper and bedtime hours. Plus, I don't have a home office that I can just sit and work in. I did a bit of math, and I came up with a salary range that I was looking for. I did a bit of research and learned that it wouldn't be totally crazy for me to make that amount without working full-time. I knew that this was a bit of a long shot, but what I needed financially was around 70% of what I could potentially be making working full-time. So I said, let's try this. Let's see if I can find something that will allow me to bring in the income that I need, but won't take up my entire day. And if it doesn't work, I'll go with a full-time job. Some people thought that I was being ridiculous. One recruiter, a frum lady, basically laughed in my face. But I had thought things through, received a vote of confidence from a few close friends and mentors, and stuck with it. I applied for a bunch of jobs on LinkedIn and didn't get a single interview. But in the end, this opportunity came up at Adi. It wasn't a job that they had posted on their website or any other platform. And when my boss asked me what my salary expectations were, I told her that I wanted to be learning in the mornings and make X amount. And Baruch Hashem, she was happy to bring me on board with the conditions that I wanted. So I learn every morning from 8:15 to 10:30. Then I drive to work and listen to Shirim and Shtark Tank on the way. I work from 11 to 5, and I'm home at around 5:30 in the evening for my family. In the evening, I do some more learning, and focus on Shtark Tank. Is this a model that others can apply in their lives? I don't know. What I do know is that I decided to give it a shot, to try and align my schedule with my values to the best degree possible. Obviously, you miss all the shots that you don't take, and Baruch Hashem, I was able to score on this one.
That's good. How'd you come up with the name Shtark Tank?
I had asked ChatGPT for names, and they were all awful. And one day it just hit me, and I was like, let's just go for it. It's not perfect because it's not really a Shark Tank style show, so it's a little confusing to people. But I think people realize that it's for people who take their Torah seriously. Most of them have been in yeshiva at some point in their life, and it's advice for the business and the career minded. So that's where the name came from.
Do you get a lot of feedback? One of the frustrating things about being a podcaster is if you use Google Analytics or whatever other tools, you could see some of the stats, but you don't necessarily hear from the people. So do people offer comments? Do they give you feedback? What's some of the feedback you've gotten?
So yeah, we have gotten feedback. Someone said that a real great way to grow a podcast is to generate controversy. Haven't really done that so much yet. But Baruch Hashem, I really appreciate, listeners who have reached out and given some comments and suggestions and expressed when they think an episode came out really good. And I really appreciate that. But we did have a really crazy story. It was on Erev Shabbos HaGadol. And I was getting ready for Shabbos with my kids. I think it was like 11:30 in the morning. The kids were all home because it was already in the pre-Pesach vacation. And I get a phone call, and I see that the number on the caller ID is Rav Efrem Goldberg. Rav Efrem Goldberg is the director of the Minneapolis Kollel, and he's been a listener for a while. And I was very nervous because it was like 2 or 3 in the morning in Minneapolis. And I was like, well, why is he calling me? So I pick up the phone, and I was like, is everything okay? He's like, yeah, sure, everything's fine. So I said, so why are you calling? He said, well, actually, we're going to my parents or in-laws for Yantif. They live in Atlanta. So we put my kids and family to sleep in the car, and I'm driving through the night, and I just binged a whole bunch of episodes, and I want to discuss some of them with you. And he had a whole bunch of comments, very interesting insights, and he also helps Avreichim in Minneapolis transition to the workforce, so he had a lot of things to say about it. So he basically wanted to keep busy on his car ride all the way down to Atlanta by hawking with me. It was Erev Shabbos HaGadol. I did have all the kids home, and it's not exactly the most relaxed time for a conversation, but we schmoozed for a while, and it was really fun.
That's great. So end us off by telling us what's next. What's the plan as you've been applying what you're learning? Where do you take the podcast from here?
Wow, there's so many things that I would love to do. Currently, the podcast certainly takes up a lot of my time, and this is in addition to a job and learning and a family, Baruch Hashem. There are so many ideas that I have. I really would love to accomplish all of them. Maybe the way to start scaling a little more is raising some money and having some more hired help to have a little more hands on deck in creating content. There's so many things. We did 2 wonderful live events, one with Rusher Weiss and one with Meir Twersky, and I would love to do more of those. I would love to invest more in my own time in writing up some of the ideas that I've heard in the podcast and trying to distribute that on these other contexts. Creating a community. So we've already, through our WhatsApp group, been able to set up some internships, set up some job interviews, set up some mentorships between listeners and guests. I would love to do more of that. I would love to set up an actual marriage shidduch, but we haven't done that yet, although we have tried. So within the realm of content, within the realm of community, within the realm of events, there's so much potential because there are so many B'nai Torah out there. They all really want to live lives that are integrated and that are wholesome and that are, makes them feel like they're Ovdei Hashem, both in the office and outside the office. And they all have different experiences. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. And so I think that the sky's the limit. There's so much to be done. So I'm really trying to think about ways to prioritize and focus on the right things that will be the most productive for the listeners, for the readers, for everyone out there. And obviously the feedback very much helps when I hear from people about what their particular struggles are, what their particular things that they enjoy most about the podcast. It really helps. And hopefully I'll have the Siyata D'Shmaya to focus my energies in the right places. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu has been really great in making everything so wonderful. And the podcast has really been a lot of fun for me. And I think that people have resonated with that as well. So I hope to be able to continue doing it for the near future and maybe the not so near future.
Well, Mazel Tov on 50 episodes. A lot of hatzlacha, shkach on the big contribution that you're making, obviously filling a space that's needed, and continue to both inspire others and be inspired yourself in the next steps of your life.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. If you enjoy this podcast, you will also love our WhatsApp community. We have a quiet WhatsApp group with episode updates, bonus content, and more, as well as a number of smaller groups, including a Daf Yomi Chabura, which we're hoping to restart soon, a discussion chat, and more ideas coming up in the pipeline. Until next time, keep on steiging, Chevra.